All right, our next speaker, someone who has just recently moved to Orlando, a really inspiration. I mean, if you looked up like sustainability or zero waste in the dictionary, literally you should see this guy's face there. I mean, he's cycled across the country to raise awareness about zero waste. He's worn his own trash for long periods of time. I mean, he's really done it all, and he's blessed us, and he's moved to Orlando and doing some great volunteering opportunities, like I mentioned. So everybody give it up for activist, environmentalist, and adventurer, and dude making a difference, Rob Greenfield.
Hey everyone, so I guess the reason I'm up here today is because I've done a lot of crazy stuff, and it's probably how Justin heard of me. And a lot of that crazy stuff that I do flies in the face of corporations like Monsanto. So I'll tell you about a few of them, and you might have seen some of them, but one of my projects was to try to bike across the United States on a bicycle made out of bamboo and try to have no negative environmental impact. So I basically had to think about every single one of my daily actions and how I affect the earth. The food that I eat, the water that I drink, my form of transportation, energy, the waste that I create. So on that bike trip, in order for food to try to have no or as little environmental impact as possible, I had to try to eat only local, organic, unpackaged food. And probably, I don't have to talk about the problems here because most of you probably know a fair bit of the problems. But you can imagine trying to find only locally grown, organic, unpackaged food 4,700 miles across the United States would be pretty darn hard. And that's when I started to learn about things like food deserts, where healthy food doesn't even exist. So on that bike trip, I made one exception, and that was that I could eat food that was going to waste. I don't know if any of you have ever dove into a dumpster here before, but for the entire summer, I dove into most every dumpster that I came across and started to learn about how much food is wasted. So in the United States, about half of all food is wasted. Enough to feed a whole nother entire American population. So after that adventure, I wanted to really start to help people visualize this. You know, $165 billion worth of food is really hard to fathom. That's more than the budgets for America's national parks, public libraries, veterans healthcare, the federal prisons, the FBI, and the FDA combined. But hard to really fathom how much food that is. So that's when I came up with the food waste fiasco, which was I would go out dumpster diving for about 1 or 2 days and collect all the food that I could find from grocery store dumpsters and lay it out in this huge mandala to create a visual that helped people to really understand how much food is going to waste. Because it can be hard to understand these issues through just a bunch of numbers and words. So it's really about trying to show these things. Another project that I did was called Trash Me. That was inspired by Morgan Spurlock's Super Size Me, where he ate just McDonald's for 30 days. Instead, I lived like the average American and wore every piece of trash that I created. So the average American creates 4.5 pounds of trash per day. So by the end of the month, I was wearing about 90 pounds of trash, just a giant walking trash suit. People called me the trash former, the trashtronaut, and things like that. And the idea was, again, 4.5 pounds of trash, it's an insane amount. But when we just stick it in the garbage can, we really don't have to think about it. And what I found was that most of the trash that I was creating was from the food that I was eating and the packaging. So that's kind of some of the things that I've been up to. But if we rewind about 7-8 years back to 2011, I would have not been able to be standing here at all. I was living what could be considered a fairly average American lifestyle. My aspirations were for the big house, the shiny car. My goal was to be a millionaire by the time that I was 30 years old. And I was basically oblivious to any of the ways that we as individuals have an impact on the world. But then something happened, or not something, but I realized I had to totally transform my life. And that I was a total hypocrite, and that my actions weren't in alignment with my beliefs. And what happened was I started to watch a lot of documentaries and read a lot of books, and I just started to realize that almost every action that I made in a given day as a human being was causing destruction to the things that I love. The food that I was eating, the car that I was driving, even the water that I was getting from the tap, the trash that I was making, the companies that I was supporting. And so at that point, I could have felt total doom and gloom, which I'm sure everybody here has had those nights of, gaining some information and then just feeling totally stressed out and that pit in your stomach, like, what the heck can I do? I'm just 1 in 7 billion. I can't change the whole world, so what's the point in trying? But instead, I actually felt extremely inspired because these great documentaries like Food Inc. and Earthlings, Zeitgeist, those were some early inspirations back in 2011. They don't just tell you about the problems, they tell you about the solutions. Today, what we have here are solutions. It's not just about the problems. There's so many solutions out there. So I became really inspired knowing, wow, there are alternatives, and I just hadn't known about them. So I started to make positive changes, and my goal was that I was about 25 years old at the time, and I realized I was a total hypocrite. I was supporting companies that I truly ethically didn't support, and I was doing all sorts of things through my actions that never in my wildest dreams did I know that I was doing. So what I decided to do was that I was just going to change my life, because at the age of 25, I wasn't going to be a hypocrite for the next 50 or so years or however long that I lived. So I knew that I had to start changing. And rather than feeling overwhelmed, I just decided I was going to start changing one step at a time. So I made a long list of changes that I wanted to make, and I hung it up right in my kitchen where I'd see it every single day. And the goal was that I would just make one positive change every single week, knowing that if I did that for about 2 years, I'd make over 100 positive changes, and that would be pretty substantial. So at the time, I was shopping at Walmart for all of my groceries. So most of my groceries were full of GMOs. So instead of shopping from the big box stores, I started to buy local, started to go to the local farmer's market. Started to buy organic food whenever I could. Now, before that, I thought organic was too expensive. But what I realized was I was pouring hundreds or thousands of dollars into all these other things and that I didn't need. So instead, maybe organic was a little more expensive, but I could allocate that money there. So I started to eat organic. Started to eat unpackaged. I realized I was filling garbage cans after all my meals. So I started to go to the local grocery store where I could buy bulk foods. That was in San Diego, and there was a co-op. But here, you've got Lucky's, and there's Bulk Nation, and I think Whole Foods has a bulk food section where you can fill up in your own packages. So I started to do that. And I started to eat a more plant-based diet. A lot, I was eating meat at almost every single meal. So I just started to eat more fruits and veggies. And it was a little bit at a time. It wasn't being fully plant-based overnight. At that time, my goal was just twice a week to try to eat a fully plant-based day. And so I found that most of the most impactful changes in my life and the world around me was the food that I was eating. That's something that each of us typically does 3 times a day or more. So it's one of the ways that we have the greatest impact in the world, for better or for worse. And what happened was, the idea was I was trying to decrease my environmental impact. That was the idea, harm the world less. But what I found was every time that I did something that was good for the earth, that ultimately it ended up being good for myself as well. As I got rid of all of these things from my life filled with things that were better. So I became a lot happier and healthier, and that allowed me to make more and more positive changes. What I found was that these positive changes were basically a building block towards living a more environmentally friendly life, and each one kind of built upon each other. And a really interesting part about it is, GMOs for me were almost a second thought. I learned about GMOs and decided I wasn't going to eat them anymore. But by starting to eat local and support local farmers, by eating unpackaged food and not processed food, mostly the GMO, and eating organic food, most of the GMOs just fell to the side without even realizing it. So the GMO diet is ultimately a byproduct of the packaged, processed, globalized food system. And when you start to connect with your food, you don't even have to think about GMOs. And in fact, before today, I probably hadn't thought about GMOs for the last couple of months until coming out here today, because a healthier lifestyle just kind of results in GMOs falling by the wayside. So let's see, what else? So another thing about GMOs is that people say, why try? You can't really avoid it. They say that it's in everything. But that is kind of the idea, is that, sure, if you want to live out of the drive-thru, and if you want to live out of the boxes and the bags, then it's really hard, really, really hard to try to not eat GMOs. But when you rethink the entire food system, then it becomes just a part of it, an easy part of it. And the big thing about, a lot of people talk to me and they say they're worried about giving things up. Like, what will I do without these modern conveniences and these luxuries? And it's a constant worry of giving things up. But ultimately what I've found is that when you give up these things, it's not just that there's a void there and that nothing replaces it. When you give something up, you make space for other things and other things come in. So the more of these frivolous things that were causing destruction to the world, and the more of these things that I was buying from corporations that I didn't support, the more I gave up, the more I was able to start receiving in abundance of things around me. The more I started to find the networks around me where my life was filled with health and happiness, but also purpose and passion. Because when I used to wake up for a while, I would wake up feeling a hole in my stomach, knowing that I was supporting all of these things that I was against. But one of the greatest things that filled me up was that I could wake up in the morning and actually feel really good about my life, instead of waking up and feeling like I was doing something wrong. So I just moved to Orlando about 5 months ago, and people ask, why the heck did I choose to move to Orlando? Like, that's Disney World. It's the one of the corporate capitals of the United States. It has more business conferences than I think any other city in the country. So most people, when they think of Orlando, they don't think of where we're standing right now. And people are really confused about that. But the reason I ended up moving to Orlando is because for the last 7 years, I've been doing a lot of traveling. And from 2015 to 2016, I was traveling for 2 years. And I ended up in Orlando with no intentions of being here. It's just where I ended up. And quickly started to see how great of a community there actually is. So I was instantly introduced to Orlando permaculture, which is represented here. Jeff's back there. It really was, yeah, let's give them a round of applause. They're pretty great. It was, it was instantly when I got here, I felt wanted and welcomed, and it felt like a great community. There's also fleet farming. I did a fleet ride the first time that I was here, and seeing how they're transforming front lawns into gardens was definitely one of the big reasons that ultimately I ended up coming back here. There's the Florida School of Holistic Living, which is just down the street, and they can teach you all about how to live in a way that's healthy for yourself. A lot of it's through herbal medicine, and they offer all sorts of classes. There's the Central Florida Fruit Society, if you want to start putting fruit trees all over the place or in your yard. And the Simple Living Institute. Those are just 5 of the many organizations and places like Dandelion Cafe, where we are right now. So when people tell me, ask why I moved to Orlando, I say there's that. But we're also in a place that is very powerful, and that is, we're not Portland and we're not San Francisco. We haven't gotten to the point of being known for that. But I truly believe that Orlando can become that. Maybe never quite San Francisco. This is the East Coast and this is the South after all. But I truly believe that Orlando is at a point where we can see huge change. So you're not, banging your head against the concrete trying to do this in the middle of Alabama or Louisiana or something like that. But we're in a place that needs the change and is open to the change. So some of the projects that I'm currently working on to add to what's already going on here, we recently started Gardens for Single Moms, which is where we're building gardens for single-parent families and teaching them how to grow their own food and cook their own food to help empower them and help them get away from the industrial globalized food system. Recently started the Free Seed Project, and so far we've sent out 2,000 free seed packs to people across the country to help them start growing their own food. So in that seed pack, there's 21 packs that has 60 different types of seeds, greens and herbs and beneficial flowers for insects and pollinators. So we can help people to, just that one pack, it costs my nonprofit about $1.50 to help someone start a garden that can produce hundreds of dollars worth of food that summer. So it's something that can really have a huge impact and help people, just naturally step away from GMOs. Another project is community fruit trees. We're in the process right now of planting 100 community fruit trees in this pretty much mostly in a 5-mile radius of here. So each one will have a sign next to it that says, I'm a community fruit tree, and they're free for picking for anybody that walks by them. And there'll be a map online where you can find them as well. So it's not just about, eating healthy, but also just realizing that food actually doesn't have to be monetized. It's not just about being a better consumer, but realizing that food is a life-giving substance that we can't live without and that really is a basic human right. And then lastly, I'm also teaching gardening for beginners workshops, and I just finished one up this morning every Saturday from 9 to 10:30. So you're all welcome to come out to those classes, and I basically cover the very basics to help you get started on gardening. And with that being said, I also have a bag full of seeds here, so I'll have these with me and you can come and get some. There's okra, collards, and then a beneficial insect attractant mix, things that grow really well in Florida right now. So one of the really important parts about that one's done anyway. One of the important parts about all this is I mentioned it's not about giving up. It's about setting that aside so that something better can make way. And what we can't do is just stand against something. We have to really stand for something, and we have to show a better way. So people will be afraid of change if they don't know there's something better on the other side of that change. But if they can see, okay, what's the alternative to this packaged, processed GMO food, and they see that it's health and abundance and a better life, that's something that people can change for. So when we march, we're marching against Monsanto, but we're also marching for many other things. And I want to mention one thing about people that work at Monsanto and Syngenta and Bayer and places like that. I was speaking in Paris at the Politico Food and Agriculture Summit, and it wasn't my typical audience. It was there was ministers of agriculture from countries like Ireland, people from the USDA and the FDA, and there were employees from Monsanto and Syngenta in the audience. And I got up there a little nervous. It wasn't quite as casual as this. I thought, how the heck is this message going to be received by the very people that I am speaking out against? And I didn't change my message much. And surprisingly, the people that I ended up shaking the most hands with and speaking with after the talk were people from Monsanto. And I realized a really important thing that day, and that's that most of these people working at companies like Monsanto, they didn't have aspirations and dreams to work at Monsanto. They found a job because they needed to pay for all their things, maybe give a good life to their family, put food on the table, as they would say, and it happens to be at a place like that. So what I've found time and time again is it's not that a lot of these people actually that are the company are there for that. It's just that they're there for the money to support their families and do their things. So again, what we need to do is show them that there is a better way outside that. We do need to talk about the problems and show that, but we also need to show that there are solutions, and many solutions are being showcased here today. And one of the reasons that it's utterly important to make positive changes in our life, sure, there's the practical part of it. Making these positive changes decreases our environmental impact, kills less animals, harms less humans, all these, very important practical things. And making the changes is important for that. But there's also one part that's often missed out. And that is that a person who takes these actions to change their life becomes an empowered person. And companies like Monsanto can have no problem standing up to a bunch of people yelling and screaming with signs. But what they can't stand up to is a group of highly empowered people who are being the change that they want to see and showing a different way, alternative to their products. And actually, the feeling of empowerment multiplies your ability to really stand up so much. But if you're kind of feeling like a hypocrite, like, well, I'm actually eating this stuff, your power just won't shine through. But as soon as you become the change that you wish to see, or at least a good fraction of it, then you're really able to start standing up to the things that you're against. So my hopes is that today, that we don't just stand against something, but maybe there's one thing that everybody in this audience thinks about, everyone here thinks about. There's, 100, 150 of us here. So what if each of us just thought of one positive change that we could make, and we took that and we wrote it down on a piece of paper, because writing it down gives it some intentions, and put it in a place where we'll see it every day and then commit to making that change. No matter how big or small, because here's the thing, every one of us can only be ourselves. You can't look at anyone else and say, I wish I was there. You can wish you were there, but you will never be that person. We can only be ourselves, and we can only be where we are in the moment that we are in. So you have to embrace where you are. Maybe your change is just not using plastic bags, like one of the very simplest, earliest, basic things. Or maybe it's something far bigger. Maybe it's not having a car and riding your bike everywhere, you know, something bigger if you've already on that path. But my hopes is that you've all thought of maybe one positive change, or as we're marching, or over the next couple hours as we're talking to all these groups over here, we think of one positive change. And then when we've made that one, we make another one. And then when we've made that one, we make another one, and then another one, and then another one, until you and we all become the change that we wish to see in the world. So thank you all for being here today. It's a huge step forward. Thank you to Justin for putting this on, and for Dandelion, and for all the groups here, and looking forward to marching with all of you. Thank you so much.